So I was looking for a deck. I figured this is 10 ticks Commander. It's sort of a fun little variant, and it was not going to be a deck I'm going to keep together forever. It's I'll play it 5 or 6 times and then take it apart. And so I looked for something I thought would be fun for 5 or 6 times and then get boring, and I settled on Baron von Count. For those who don't know, Baron von Count is an uncard. It starts when it's a 3/3 for 3, black red 1. And when you play it, you put a counter on 5. And every time you cast a spell with that number on it, you move the counter down 1. So
anywhere
on the card. Yes, pretty much.
Not just the mana cost,
yes.
But anywhere in the text box or whatever.
Mana cost, text box, power, toughness. Mm-hmm. And so you play a spell with a 5 on it, and it moves down to 4. You play a spell with a 4, it moves down to 3. Eventually, it moves down to 1, and you play a 1 spell, and it destroys target player and goes back to 5. So I was like, this is the sort of thing which is going to be fun for a few times. I'll blow up a few players, and then we'll retire the deck, and we're done with 10 ticks Commander.
Yeah.
And so
now,
I built it from scratch.
Remember that we had secured permission with each other to do such things.
Yes, obviously this is not for an untrusted group or anything. I also like the message of the first RC stream having a card that technically broke the rules in it.
Right.
So the deck, of course, because I never build a deck with just the Commander restraints. The first pass of the deck, every card in it had to have at least 4 of the 5 numbers. That turned out to be basically impossible.
So how did you find that out? Did you write like a Perl?
Yeah, I wrote a bunch of code and hacked a text file and dug out and had lists of all the cards and how many numbers they had on them and everything else. Yes, I do that sort of thing to build a Commander deck.
Next leveling your nerd.
Absolutely. Now it turned out that there were no spells with 4 numbers on them. So if I was going there, it was going to have to be all creatures. And there were almost not enough cards at that point. If I relaxed the restriction on spells to 3, I ended up with 115 or so cards to make a Commander deck out of, which meant you need 60-something of them. So the version I first put together had some real winners in it. I had like Primal Clay was in the first pass of the deck.
Nice.
Arcslogger was in the first pass of the deck. There was an artifact sub-theme because I had to get in 3 or 4 very iffy artifact creatures and Golem Artisan. And I put this
right.
and I put
it works with creatures that have mismatched power and toughness.
Yes, that's a very big way of getting these things. And then so I started putting this together and I'm looking and I'm like, this is really terrible even for my standards. And so I relaxed the creature restriction to basically I said every card in the deck that is in the land has to have 3 of the numbers on it. And that actually got enough cards that you could put together a deck that looked like a normal Commander deck with its own little special quirk. So that's what I ended up going with. It turns out level up cards are covered in numbers. A couple of them have all 5.
Yeah, that was a genius find right
there. Yeah, that was like, these have every number. And actually, what happens right now is that we're streaming these games, so of course our hands aren't visible. So I usually have my hand laid out face up on the table on the desk next to where the streaming rig is, and I would be sitting there and I would be arranging my cards like, okay, here's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but I can also do this, and we'll get to what happened at the end of game 2 because I very much had this laid out on the table as, okay, what's my game plan here?
Right.
So every card in the deck is designed to trigger Baron. And otherwise it's a pretty, because the 3 restriction with spells especially really helped. It actually had enough game on spells. You got, for example, Mizium Mortar's Breath of Daragaz and Slice and Dice all have all 3 numbers on them, or have 3 numbers on them.
Right. So you have some creature control.
Yes. There's a few targeted removal spells that actually have a bunch of numbers on them. For example, the Ruinous Path, the Awaken one. The Awaken destroy target creature or planeswalker Awaken 4 has 3 numbers on it because there's an Awaken cost, there's a casting cost. There's a third number on there somewhere, but
Yeah, I guess bolster and amass would help out too.
Yeah, well, none of those had enough numbers.
Yeah.
But yes, it's sort of along those lines. And so the deck actually played out. In fact, in game 2, we saw when we got into a situation where I could not play Baron von Count, the deck itself was actually capable of playing like a normal commander deck and doing commandery things, like attacking you for 21. But yeah, the primary game plan was get down Baron von Count on turn 3, and then play 1 or 2 spells a turn and see if anybody could avoid the laser on the moon.
Right. Yeah, that in the one game, Scott Marchese's deck was making a pretty hostile environment for creatures.
Well,
so keeping Baron von Count out.
That wasn't the problem. Your equilibrium was a problem.
My equilibrium was also which was so cheap. Again, when I was building the deck, I'm like, maybe I want to bounce my creatures. So I looked at Crystal Shard, and it was 4 tickets or something.
Yep.
It was, it was kind of dumb. It's like, well, I can't play that. And then found Equilibrium at 0.02 ticks. And it's like, oh, well, I'm going to have some creature control. Because Azuri is clearly about playing a bunch of small creatures and getting the experience counters going. So that you can then smash face.
Yeah, and of course, the thing you didn't know and we didn't know going in was we weren't like talking about the commanders in advance.
Mm-hmm.
So you are not extensively, and so you didn't know that you'd be facing black red, and black red white.
Right.
Enchantments were not going to get off the board.
Right.
It just wasn't going to happen. So it turned out any enchantment anybody played was going to affect the board for the rest of the game. And of course, Equilibrium was a huge problem for Baron von Count. Because every time you bounce it back to hand, it resets the counter back to 5.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was a weird quirk of those games, is that we all, for some reason, decided black-red was the way to go, except you.
Yeah. My acidic slime did some work in both of those games.
Yeah, well, you had options, because you were running green. But your enchantments were just not getting touched.
Yeah, but there were... How did... Somebody got rid of a couple of them. Oh, Scott played... was that Scott played Martyr's Bond?
No, but it would have to have been Scott, because Scott had the white.
Yeah.
So Scott might have had the occasional enchantment removal.
Yeah, but that really, really indirect.
Yeah, I mean,
enchantment.
Artifacts were going to be dead. There was a lot of red in that game, but enchantments were just sitting pretty.
Yeah. So in game 1, I got things running relatively early and was getting some experience counters, but you were ticking down the count.
Yes, I got count on turn 3 and went 5, 4, 3. And nobody was doing. Everybody was looking worried. Gavin was certainly. I think Gavin was capable of removing it at that point, but hadn't. Was waiting to see what happened. I mean, the count gives you a lot of opportunities to remove it. You can remove it in response to the final counter moving. You can remove it, at any point really in there, and nothing will happen.
I mean, I think it's helpful to explain that there are 2 triggers on Baron von Count.
Yeah, I mean, Baron von Count is not a powerful card. Let's be clear. It is a fun and silly card, but it's not that powerful because you have to play 5 spells. You have to play 5 cards after you play it. They have to have the requirements of cost and everything, which was not a problem for this deck. But then each time that's a triggered ability, so removing him any time is fine. I'm not going to do it all in one turn so you have sorcery speed removal can deal with it at various points. And then the last counter, when you move the last counter, there's another triggered ability that destroys target creature. And none of these are optional, by the way, and this will be very important for later on.
Player.
Destroy target player. Yes. So none of these abilities are optional. So it takes a long time to destroy a player, as it should. I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah. But it's not powerful, but it's still scary.
Oh yeah, no, it's a laser on the moon. And, I was fairly confident Gavin had the ability to remove it, but was not acting and was going to wait and see what actually happened.
Yeah.
So, yes, I got Baron out. I'm ticking it down nicely. It's going to go off at some point.
Yeah, and then you had it at 2.
Yes.
And you pass, and I was sitting to your left.
Yes, and I'm almost certain I was going to be able to play a 2 and a 1 in the next turn and kill somebody.
Right. Well,
no, I had it at 1.
You had it at 1.
That's right.
You had it at 1.
Yes.
Right. but you were tapped out. So then on my turn, I played Reigns of Power, grabbed it, and the only reason I did that was because I had a card in my hand that I knew I could use, and that was Kozilek's Predator,
Yep.
which has 1 in the text box because that's the amount of mana that the spawns give you, and plus
There's 0 1s. I think the mana actually is in the reminder text.
It's a C, right? And there's 0 1s. So yeah, so I Reigns of Power and gave you a pretty good board, by the way.
Yes, it was lovely. Briefly.
Briefly. And then cast Kozilek Predator and destroyed you with your own Baron von Count. Came back. That was the last sort of relevant thing I did in that game.
Yeah, it was pretty relevant.
But it was... I certainly didn't win the game.
Yeah, no, I mean, Baron von Count is also, as we say, because it's slow and all the rest of it, it's also extremely dangerous in an environment where people are stealing stuff.